Vegetarianism is the opposite of veganism. They're not similar, they're not anywhere near the same thing. If this statement sounds crazy to you, it's because you've been swindled into seeing vegetarianism as some kind of benevolent thing, some kind of middle ground between flesh eating and veganism, when actually, vegetarianism and flesh eating are as distant from veganism as each other. I like to think of vegetarianism as a sleazy salesman. It presents itself to the buyer as an act of altruism and kindness, when the reality is that the buyer, high on feelings of positivity as they make the transaction, will be paying for exactly the same evil and cruel acts they were paying for before. In fact, the smokescreen of vegetarianism as ethical or even semi ethical is so strong that I bet many of you who are vegan, who are watching this video, disagree with me vehemently already when I say that vegetarianism is actually the opposite of veganism.
Yes, that's correct. I am one of those vegans. But I actually, I don't know. I feel like at least the people I see online, a large amount of vegans feel this way. But I don't know if they did back when this video was made 2 years ago, it looks like. So this might have been the start to it. So anyways, I'm going to go through and explain why I disagree with this video. Before I do that, I do want to point out that it was actually today that I discovered Carnism Debunked channel. And this was the first video I watched, and I strongly disagree with the message in this video. But I went and watched a handful of his other videos, and they're really great, and I'm excited to go through and check them all out. So sometimes when I do reaction videos, people think that I am trashing on the person. So even though I will point out a lot of things I disagree with this man on, it's nothing against him. Kind of like Joey Carbstrong. I follow him. I subscribe to him. I just happen to have made a video or two where I find some issues in things he does. I think that's what we should do more often. I don't think we should necessarily like trash on each other and have like vegans hating vegans, but maybe constructive criticism, but definitely conversations and sharing our thoughts. I don't want videos like this to seem like attacks in any way, although sometimes it might come across that way. So
I'm going to now prove to you just how effective this sleazy sales trick has been with a simple experiment. If I say shredding male chicks alive in a macerator is the opposite of veganism, I'm pretty sure 100% of people watching this video would say, well, obviously. If I say bludgeoning calves to death with pickaxes is the opposite of veganism, once again, I'd bet my house that every single person watching this video would be in complete agreement.
okay, I'll just go one at a time. So the chicks one is referring to what happens in the egg industry. They'll let however many eggs hatch for the sake of getting new egg laying hens. And so 50%, which are the girls, they'll keep them, and those will become egg laying hens to some degree. And then the males, right at birth, essentially, once they realize they're males, just get put on a conveyor belt. They go in and they get ground up. And so this would be happening due to the egg industry. Therefore, eating eggs would lead to this. Therefore, vegetarians are still causing this harm. Now, I would be curious to see if there were some data about how many more eggs a vegetarian would eat than a meat eater. I highly doubt that it goes to any wild extreme to where if a meat eater eats 2 eggs for breakfast and then some sausage and bacon, and then a vegetarian, I would think, would eat 2 eggs for breakfast and hash browns and like vegan type things. And the idea that they would like maybe double up to make up for the amount of meat they're missing out on, I highly doubt it. But I don't know what that number would even need to look like. And another thing I would point out is, as I've talked about many times, I care a lot more about suffering than I do about the death itself. I don't think animals should have to die for our taste buds, but I more so don't want them to suffer. So the chicks being ground up, it's one of the more disturbing images, but I'd call it one of the lesser of the evils out of all the evils. Something like the standard in the pig industry of like cutting out the teeth, cutting off the tails, and just the torture they go through for that kind of thing, or chickens raised for their meat are fattened up so quick that they like collapse on themselves, their legs break, and they're just suffering until they get eaten. I would say I care more about that element than I do about the grinding to a quick death. It's definitely disturbing and it shouldn't happen. But if I had to rank things, the reason I paused it there to go one at a time was because of the calf one. Now the calf one is, let me sit here and ponder just for a sec. Nope, I'm not gonna be able to do it while I'm on the spot. But the calf one would be what's happening due to not wanting to give the milk from a dairy cow to its baby. So they take the baby away right away, and then the girls will become dairy cows likely, and the boys will be killed soon for veal. Now, I don't know if killing the boys soon for veal would necessarily count. Like, I don't know if that is a byproduct of the dairy industry. It might completely be. And therefore I could be wrong, and then that would be worth factoring in. But I would wonder what would happen if everybody on Earth refused to eat veal. If veal did not exist anymore, what would they do with that cow? I don't know if your average cow that's used for beef is male or female, but I know that your average cow used for beef, I'm pretty sure, isn't just the dairy cows once they've reached a late age. In fact, I think that that meat might be specifically something that's used for like dog food or something, and where there are cows raised specifically for their beef. And so even though in the dairy industry they wouldn't want to give the cows the milk because they want to give it to humans for whatever silly reasons humans want milk, but I am also shocked that they don't raise those babies to be bigger to sell them for beef. So I guess that's something I need to look into further. So yeah.
If I say hacking lambs' tails off and sending them on ships for live export in the wool industry is the opposite of veganism, once again, any rational person watching would just agree with me. Yeah.
Now, one thing I want to point out with the lamb thing. Now, I didn't know about the tail thing. That's very strange, and I want to know what the reason is. But it doesn't matter in the sense of this video. I would say I wouldn't use that as an argument against vegetarians. Now, vegetarians do not have a claim that vegans do of specifically wanting to cause such little harm that they declare they don't buy things like wool and leather and all that kind of stuff. But to assume that they are buying wool and leather, I just don't know if that's fair, because I think what they are almost explicitly declaring is, since they're calling themselves vegetarian and not vegan, they are declaring that they eat dairy and they eat eggs. If they didn't, I mean, it's possible they could have a lactose intolerant person to the level of not eating dairy, but they're going to call themselves vegan, or going to call themselves vegetarians because they eat eggs, but they're that much closer to being vegan. But I'm guessing your average one is like that is what they're declaring. And I just, I wouldn't think it's fair to assume that they use wool, and definitely not to any strange extreme. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
Whenever I say vegetarianism is the opposite of veganism, as is the title of this video, this is met with disagreement and controversy, even though vegetarianism funds all those things.
Well, part of the problem is calling it the opposite. So you said the grinding chicks into a grinder is that the opposite of veganism? Of course, it's not the opposite of veganism. That's just an element that you would remove from what you participate in if you are vegan. Like, it is not the opposite of veganism. So I think the wording might just be not the best, in my opinion, for how to describe it. Because I definitely don't think you should call it vegetarian the opposite of veganism. But I also don't even think you should call it some huge horrible thing. I think it is a good. I think it's a net positive. And so whatever you might come up with to call it that might be best, I would probably disagree with as well.
So, how on earth is it possible that any of those things alone can be the opposite of veganism? Yet somehow, when we combine them and just give it a word like vegetarianism, it now magically becomes similar to veganism. It makes no sense. So, just to be clear, in the egg industry, male chicks are shredded alive because they can't lay eggs. Vegetarians pay for this. In the dairy industry, cows are sexually violated, branded with hot irons, have their calves stolen from them, and the male ones are murdered while the female ones grow up as slaves for their lactations and are eventually slaughtered.
Yeah, I do want to point out for anyone listening, I would say that eating dairy, I think, is worse than eating meat. Probably, I think the amount of suffering and the problems that go in the dairy industry, I think, are worse than meat. But backtracking really quick to the egg thing. Oh, what did he say? He said something I just wanted to comment on. Let me just go back a quick sec.
Vegetarians pay for this. In the dairy industry, similar to veganism. It makes no sense. So, just to be clear, in the egg industry, male chicks are shredded alive because they can't lay eggs.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I wonder how many people that eat eggs know about this. I don't know if a lot know about that. And so even though what they're paying for, if they knew some backstory, they'd know that it's also causing this issue. I think there's a lot of things that we factor in. Like when we talk about, like, say, something like crop deaths, when people use that as an argument against veganism, we'll point out that this thing is happening, but we're not intentionally doing it. It's like this accidental thing. Now this element's not an accidental thing, but the person that's wanting the egg, they're wanting the egg, but if they knew that they were killing a chicken for it, because I mean that's the thing. Vegetarians, a lot of them might just not want to have animal flesh in their mouth, but I think most of them don't want to kill animals, and they just don't know much about the dairy industry and the egg industry. But I would guess that most of them don't want the sadness to happen. A lot of vegetarians, from my understanding, turn vegetarian because of things like watching factory farm videos. And so if they knew this part, I don't think they would do it. Not that that's an excuse for them doing it, but we don't all know exactly what's going on in factory farms. Now, we can learn stuff. If you show a vegetarian this and they still get their eggs that way, then yes, they are essentially paying for it. If your average egg is brought to the store by these acts happening. But being a vegetarian doesn't mean that you have to contribute to it. So if somebody knew about this and then had, like, not that I'm in favor of it, but if somebody had like a backyard chicken and got their own eggs that way, or if they got their eggs any other way that they could figure out how to, I don't know if there's any farms that don't contribute to this process. I think most of them in one way or another contribute to it. So I guess backyard eggs would maybe be the only way. But yeah, I think that might be more of an educational thing.
Vegetarians pay for this. In the dairy industry, cows are sexually violated, branded with hot irons, have their calves stolen from them, and the male ones are murdered while the female ones grow up as slaves for their lactations and are eventually slaughtered. Vegetarians pay for this. In the wool industry, lambs unfit for wool production are bludgeoned to death by being slammed against the wall or floor, while ones fit for wool production have their tails hacked off, have tags put in their ears, are shorn, often very roughly, being beaten and cut during the process, and are eventually murdered, often after being exported to other countries on hellishly long journeys via boat. Vegetarians pay for this.
Okay, so I do want to point out this is a very well put together video. I think this is a great video for showing vegetarians why they should go vegan. But again, and I'm sure I'll get into more detail here in a little bit. The idea that vegetarians would just double up on their stuff, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense to me. There's a handful of, well, before I get into that, so meat eaters do all these things. They probably contribute to wool. They contribute to eggs, milk, all these different things. And the vegetarian is essentially the meat eater, but then cutting out all the meat, which is a big portion of an issue we have. And so to assume that they just go and consume like way more of this, more eggs and dairy than your typical meat eater, I just find it to be a wild assumption. I'm guessing most vegetarians eat things like Impossible Burgers and Beyond Burgers and tofu and all these different things. So they're not having like double the eggs and double the cheese and whatever. They're just having a normal amount of all that, but they're replacing the meat with other stuff. So, because yeah, if you look at various different things, like most fast food places that have switched over to having vegan friendly options, Burger King has an Impossible Burger, but you have to ask to take the cheese off because it comes with cheese, because most people getting that are vegetarians that are replacing the meat element. They're not getting like 3 slices of cheese on there and eggs on their burger. They're just getting a vegan burger that has cheese on it, which is not good. I don't think they should be supporting the cheese element. They might not be cutting out the most important element, but they are definitely cutting back on how many animals are bred into existence for their flesh to be used.
Now, what about quantity then? You'll find that many apologists for vegetarianism argue that a vegetarian massively reduces their impact in comparison to a meat eater and kills way fewer animals. And you know what? Maybe in some cases that's true. But guess what? You can't just make blanket statements like that. In fact, it absolutely is possible for a vegetarian to cause as much or more harm than a flesh eater.
I agree. You can't make blanket statements like, I don't know for a fact that they don't use more dairy and eggs. But you also can't make the claim that it's the opposite or not helpful by essentially making the blanket statement that they are doing this other thing. Because maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I think it's reasonable to say they likely aren't, but it's definitely not reasonable to say that they're doing worse than them, which is what this idea is, what the video is. And yeah, so
for example, a vegetarian who eats shitloads of eggs and eats animal foods every single day causes way more harm than, say, a flesh eater who maybe has an egg or dairy allergy, who eats bacon once or twice a week and has the odd cheeseless pizza every now and then.
No, this is true, and everybody's different. So there are probably plenty of non-vegans, just meat eaters out there that eat a very small amount of meat, and they're very careful about it. They do like a grass-fed, hormone-free, whatever, and maybe they don't eat any eggs, or they have like 1 egg a week or something, and they have almost no dairy, maybe no dairy. And therefore that person, compared to a vegetarian that eats an endless amount of dairy and eggs, I think more harm and suffering is coming from that person. But I mean, the same can be said about anything. You could have a vegan that doesn't consume any animal products and doesn't wear any animal products, but actions they do in their life can be so much worse than the example of the person you have that eats like 1 piece of meat a month or a week and 1 egg a week or whatever. And the vegan person, I mean, I don't like to get into environmental stuff, but the vegan person could just be constantly just using all the single-use plastics and getting like crazy amounts of plastic going off into the world, and eating food that where they're not worried about something where a certain food might come from a certain place where like the natural habitat of orangutans is being destroyed, or various different things, or maybe they're doing something that's harmful to people. Not that we should bring people into veganism. I don't think it's connected, but I'm just saying somebody being vegan doesn't mean they're doing everything perfectly. Somebody being vegetarian doesn't mean they're not worse than a meat eater that's doing a certain way of doing a thing. But somebody going from eating meat, dairy, eggs, honey to doing dairy, eggs, honey, and no meat, that's gotta be better. I mean, it doesn't have to be better. It would only depend on if they're doubling up stuff. It doesn't matter what another person does. It doesn't matter if another meat eater does better than them.
The amount of male chicks macerated, and indeed female chicks bred into existence to lay eggs for them and suffer various abuses throughout their lives until being murdered, is astronomical.
Yeah, but it's not worse than if they kept eating meat. That it has to be better too. Anyways, I'm going to stop here because I'm almost at 20 minutes. I might do a follow-up, but I might not. But I think I've expressed my thoughts here, and I hope you enjoy it. And also check out this guy's channel. It's pretty awesome. Take care.